You know that kind of cold that just doesn't feel like air conditioning? The kind that creeps under your clothes, settles right between your ribs, and makes you feel like you're standing somewhere you shouldn't be? Yeah, that was the cold inside Redwood Superior Court that morning. The doors swung open with this heavy, echoing thud, and, I swear, every single person in that room turned to look. Not curious, not sympathetic, more like judging. The kind of look that says, "Oh, so that's the kid causing all this mess." And then she walked in. Ava Bennett, 8 years old, tiny, pale, quiet in that hollow way kids get when they've seen too much. She held on to Coda's fur like she was holding the last solid thing left on the planet. And honestly, in her world, maybe she was. Coda, this big, battle-scarred German shepherd who once worked the Texas border, walked beside her like he was guarding a piece of glass someone had already cracked. His ears were forward, his walk steady. But you could see it in his eyes. He was reading everything, every sound, every heartbeat, every damn intention in the room. Ava didn't look left, didn't look right. Just straight ahead, with these empty, cloudy eyes, like she was trying not to remember something, or trying way too hard not to feel anything. And the room reacted in the ugliest way possible. A couple of people whispered. One woman shook her head. A man in the back scoffed. "That kid again?" You could feel the doubt squeezing her from all angles, like hands around her throat. Ava's fingers curled deeper into Coda's fur, like she was drowning, and he was the only thing keeping her above water. Coda didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just pressed closer to her leg. A tiny movement, but intentional. They reached the witness chair. Well, the one in front of it, because she was too young. She climbed up slowly, like gravity was heavier on her than on everyone else. She sat. Coda sat. The room held its breath. Then, bam! The judge's gavel hit wood so hard the whole room jerked. Ava did too. Her shoulders jumped. Her shoe slipped. Her hand grabbed the chair, like she was falling. Her eyes flickered with something raw. Fear. The kind that comes straight from memory, not imagination. Coda leaned in. Slow. Steady. Almost like he was saying, "Hey, breathe. I'm here." She pulled a shaky breath into her lungs. Not perfect, not calm, but enough. The judge, usually warm, looked different today. Tired, wary, maybe even annoyed. He looked up and said, "Before we begin, we must ask whether this witness is credible." And just like that, boom, the whole building exhaled that same ugly judgment. People shifted. Someone muttered, "This is ridiculous." A few heads shook. Ava's breath hitched. Her fingers twisted tighter in Coda's fur. Her eyes dropped like she'd been struck. You could see it hit her. The exact moment a whole town decided she might be a liar, Not because of evidence, not because of facts, but because she was small and scared and ate. Her jaw trembled. Her foot tapped the chair leg, frantic, panicked, seconds from shutting down. Coda moved again, placing his body between her and the room, not blocking her view, blocking their energy. His breathing was even, measured, grounding. Ava tried to match it, following the rhythm of the only steady thing she had left. Everyone saw it. This wasn't a brave kid. This was a broken kid, fighting not to fall apart in front of people who already hated her for speaking up. Then the judge said the line that cracked the last bit of air in the room. We need to determine if this child, this very young child, is capable of telling the truth. It hit Ava like a slap. Her eyes squeezed shut. Her chest tightened. Her fingers dug so deep into Coda's fur, she nearly pinched skin. Coda sensed it. His body went still. Predator still, reading danger no one else could. And if you froze that moment, like a slow-motion frame, you'd see it clearly. A tiny girl holding onto a dog like he was the last safe thing in a courtroom that wanted her to disappear. And yeah, the emotional freefall had officially begun. Because right after the judge questioned Ava's credibility, right after her fingers tightened in Coda's fur, Miles Carrington finally made his move. You could hear his damn shoes before you even saw him. That slow, confident tap, tap, tap on the polished floor. The type of walk of a man who always wins. He stepped into Ava's line of sight like he owned the building, which I'm pretty sure he thought he did. Miles Carrington wasn't just any lawyer from Denver. He was the lawyer, the shark in a tailored charcoal suit, the kind of guy who smiles in TV interviews while saying things that ruin families for the rest of their lives. The kind of man who's never heard the word no without making someone pay for it. And right now, yeah, his eyes were locked on an 8-year-old kid like she was some annoying paperwork he needed to shred. He crouched, slowly, way too slowly, like he was performing for an invisible camera. And then he leaned in, a little too close, a little too familiar, a little too predatory. Ava stiffened immediately. Her breath caught. Coda's body tensed, but he stayed silent, exactly the way he'd been trained. Miles smiled at Ava like he was auditioning for most fake empathy of the year. Hey there, he whispered, syrupy sweet. I know this must be scary for you. But his eyes, God, his eyes were cold enough to frost glass. No warmth, no kindness, just calculation. He kept smiling as he leaned closer, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath against her ear. And then his voice dropped, sharp, poisonous, aimed only at her and Coda. You say one word, just one, and I'll make sure that dog disappears. Ava froze. Not the confused kind of freeze. No. This was the kind where a terrified little girl falls straight back into the worst night of her life. Her legs wobbled, her throat locked, Her fingers slipped on Coda's fur like she suddenly didn't remember how to hold anything. Fear spread through her chest like spilled ink. Coda picked it up instantly. His entire body tightened, not ready to lunge, but coiled, braced, ready. His jaw flexed. His ears shot forward. A slow, controlled inhale filled his ribcage like he was deciding whether this was danger level 3 or danger level 10. Ava swayed on the chair, eyes flickering. Trapped between the courtroom and that dark night on Riverpoint Street. She whispered, barely audible, "Coda." Miles kept smiling, still crouched, still pretending to shuffle papers like he wasn't threatening a child and her service dog. Then, quieter, the kind of quiet meant to scar, he added, "Accidents happen during K9 drills. Dogs get shot all the time. You understand me, sweetheart?" That last word, sweetheart, was dipped in poison. Ava jolted. Her breath snapped short, violent, like her body forgot how to function. Her hands shook so hard she nearly fell off the chair. She wasn't in the courtroom anymore. Not in her mind. She was somewhere dark. Somewhere the air tasted like dust and sweat and danger. Somewhere a grown man had grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. Time 300 mums. And then, it happened. Her knees buckled. She would have dropped to the courtroom floor if Coda hadn't moved first. The shepherd pressed himself against her leg, catching her weight with a silent, perfect correction. A living anchor. His head angled toward her, and for a moment, the whole universe shrank to her shaking fingers, his steady breath, her terror, his silent vow to hold her together. Something in the air shifted, like even the room sensed the threat. Miles cleared his throat and stood, slipping his fake professional mask back on. He walked away with a smug flicker in his eyes, like he believed, yeah, that should shut her up. But Coda didn't look away. He tracked Miles with eyes that had seen cartel smugglers, armed criminals, and men desperate enough to shoot at shadows in the dead of night. Eyes that didn't forget. Ava swallowed hard, chest trembling with tiny broken breaths. The prosecutor mouthed, "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her world had shrunk again, down to fear and fur, and the echo of a threat no one else heard. And then, quietly, almost like fate nudging a piece into place, a faint red blink lit up beneath Coda's collar. One small pulse, soft, hidden. Ava didn't notice. Miles sure as hell didn't. But someone in the back of the courtroom did. Officer Grant Holloway straightened in his seat, his eyes locked onto that tiny flashing dot. And he whispered, under his breath, "Good boy." Because after Miles Carrington slithered away like the snake he was, after he dropped that threat like a match into gasoline, Ava wasn't the only one who heard it. Coda did too, and you could tell. Not by a growl, he didn't make a sound. Not by a bark, he didn't even flinch. No, the first sign was smaller than that. He moved his head, slowly, deliberately, and pressed it into Ava's thigh. Just that. Just that tiny, steady push. But God, it mattered. Ava sucked in a shaky breath, the kind that sounds like a kid trying not to fall apart. Her small fingers curled into Coda's fur like she was clinging to a rope dangling off a cliff. Coda didn't pull away, didn't shift, didn't get distracted. He anchored himself, literally anchored, like his whole 85-pound body existed just to keep her from slipping into the dark again. And if you looked close, really close, you'd notice his breathing. Slow, deep, rhythmic, almost like he was telling her, breathe with me, right here, right now, don't go back to that night. And Ava did try. Her chest rose in uneven, trembling gasps, following his rhythm the best she could. Not perfect, not calm, but trying, which, in that moment, was everything. The courtroom didn't change, though. People still whispered, still judged, still looked at Ava like she was some inconvenient problem. But Coda? Coda didn't give them a single glance. His eyes, God, those eyes, locked onto one person only, Miles Carrington. That look, Nakomfai Hung Hung. No bared teeth, no threat. Just sharp. Sharp like a blade someone forgot to dull. A warrior's focus, from a dog who didn't make a sound. Miles must have felt it, because he hesitated mid-step before forcing himself to keep walking. But yeah, it was there. His shoulders tensed. His hand tightened on his briefcase. He knew. He absolutely knew Coda saw him for exactly what he was. Ava didn't notice that, though. She was too busy trying to breathe in a room that made her feel like she was drowning. Her shoe tapped frantically against the chair leg. Her eyes stayed glued to the floor or Coda's fur, too afraid to look anywhere else. Coda pressed closer. And here's the crazy part. Well, crazy to people who've never seen a real K9 work. He wasn't comforting her. He was stabilizing her. That's a real thing. A grounding technique K9s learned for trauma cases. They match breathing, pressure, position. They become a wall, a silent, breathing wall. Ava's hand shook so hard, she nearly slipped off the chair again. But Coda adjusted instantly. Years of training along the Texas border lived in every careful movement. He slid a paw forward to brace her foot, shifted his weight so she wouldn't tip, lowered his head just enough for her to feel him. Not see, not hear. Feel. Because sometimes children who stop talking, stop connecting to anything except touch. Miles could threaten all he wanted. The judge could doubt her. The gallery could roll their eyes. But nothing could break the quiet connection between this little girl and her retired warrior. Ava's breathing steadied, just a little. Her fingers loosened, her shoulders eased, and for the first time since she sat down, she lifted her head. Not bravely, not boldly, just enough to see Coda watching her. His eyes weren't soft. They weren't pleading. They were focused, alert, saying, without a single sound, "I've got you," even when you think no one else does. It hit harder than anything a human could have said. The prosecutor paused mid-sentence. Officer Grant Holloway leaned forward. Even a couple jurors blinked, unsure what they were witnessing, because what they were seeing wasn't a pet, or a therapy animal, or some emotional support plush toy. They were watching a K-9 soldier slip into silent battle mode, not against guns, not against criminals, against fear, against trauma, against a grown man using his power to crush a child. Ava whispered something, barely audible. It might have been coda, or I'm scared, or maybe just a breath that sounded like words. Coda's tail moved once, just once, a tiny thump on the floor, a signal only she could read. He was telling her, "I heard you." Not with ears, with instinct, with loyalty, with a kind of love that didn't need to be pretty or poetic to be real. The judge cleared his throat. Papers shuffled. "Let's continue," he said, as if an emotional earthquake hadn't just happened. But anyone really watching knew the truth. A little girl wasn't standing alone anymore. A warrior was standing with her. And just between us, let me ask the audience something. Have you ever seen a dog look at someone with the eyes of, "I will protect you until my last breath"? A, then B, no, or C? Yes, but it still gives me goosebumps every time I remember it. It happened fast, like a switch flipping. Ava blinked, and suddenly, she wasn't in the courtroom anymore. She was back on Riverpoint Street. And you know, it's strange how the mind works, how a kid can sit in a wooden chair under fluorescent lights, surrounded by adults in suits, and still get dragged straight back to a night that shattered her world. It started with sound. Not a scream. Not the big, obvious stuff. Just small. A thump. A dull, heavy thud echoing in her memory like it was still happening. Ava's fingers twitched. Her eyes went glossy, unfocused. Coda leaned in, sensing the shift. But even he couldn't stop what came next. Because once her mind opened that door, everything came rushing in. She could smell the carpet from that night. That old, dusty scent of a house that was too quiet. She could hear the TV in the living room, playing some late-night news, the kind grown-ups leave on to Cam Jack bought Codun. But the house didn't feel safe. Not that night. Ava remembered standing at the top of the stairs, her stuffed rabbit hanging from one ear. She just wanted water. Nothing dramatic. Just a thirsty kid wandering through the dark, then the yell. A raw, angry shout that cracked the air like lightning. Ava flinched in the courtroom just hearing it in her head. She remembered the glass hitting the floor. Not breaking. Slamming. Like someone threw it. No. Like someone dropped it during a fight. And then the heavy sound. The one that still woke her at night. Thud. Something, or someone, hit the wall. Ava froze mid-step on the stairs. She remembered the cold wooden edge under her toes. And then the voice. "Ava, stay where you are." Her father, Ethan Boyd. But not the dad she knew. Not the Saturday morning pancake dad. Not the backyard laughing dad. This voice was low, slurred, controlled in a way that felt wrong. Ava whispered, in the memory only she could hear. "Daddy?" Something moved in the hallway. A shadow. A shape. A shoulder. Broad. Tense. Ethan stepped into view, and Ava remembered. God, she remembered. The look in his eyes. Not angry, not sad. Worse. Empty. Like he wasn't really there with her. Ava's chest tightened in the courtroom. Her breaths became those sharp, fragile gasps kids make right before panic hits. Her memory kept going. He stumbled toward her. One hand on the wall for balance, the other reaching out. Not like a father, but like someone trying to grab something slipping away. "Ava, come here," he'd said. But the words were wrong, warped and heavy like thick smoke. She stepped back. Just one step. But in her memory, that one step doomed everything. Ethan lunged, a grown man's hand closing around an 8-year-old's wrist. Ava jerked in her seat, like she still felt those fingers squeezing too tight. He dragged her down the stairs, her socks slipping, her stuffed rabbit falling behind her. She tried to scream. Her mouth opened, her lungs expanded. But the only sound that came out was nothing. Because that night was the night she lost her voice. Not physically, psychologically. Trauma can slam a lock on a child's words, like a door slamming shut in a storm. Ethan had pulled her into the hallway corner, the one where the lights flickered because the wiring was old. She remembered the flicker, the shadows moving like monsters, and then the roar. Not human, not sane, something primal, angry, broken. Ava's heart slammed against her ribs in the present. Her hand trembled violently on Coda's fur. And then, the loudest memory. The crash. Something, or someone, falling hard. That was the moment she shut down. Stillness. Silence. That shadow-lit hallway on Riverpoint Street stole her voice. And now, years later, she sat in a courtroom full of doubters. Because she couldn't speak about the night that broke her, Coda nudged her, sensing her slipping deeper into the nightmare. But Ava didn't blink, didn't return. She was trapped between past and present, breathing like she was running underwater. And as the memory faded, as the courtroom snapped back around her, one chilling truth hovered in the air. How do you expect a child to speak when the last time she tried, her whole world shattered? It all happened in a place most people wouldn't even look twice at. The children's therapy room at the Redwood Police Department. Not fancy, not warm, not even particularly kid-friendly. Just a small room with scuffed walls, mismatched chairs, and a wooden floor that creaked like it had seen way too much. But for Ava Bennett, this little room was where her whole world shifted. Ava didn't walk into that room on her own. Of course she didn't. She was being guided by a gentle hand on her shoulder. Officer Harper, a woman with kind eyes who spoke softly, knew the moi tu do so hin Ava vora themlin nua. Sweetheart, Harper whispered, kneeling in front of her. We're just gonna sit for a bit, okay? No questions, no talking. You can just exist. Ava didn't answer. Couldn't answer. She stared at the floor with that hollow look kids have when they've been scared for too long. Her socks made no sound on the wooden boards as she shuffled inside, shoulders curled inward like she was trying to make herself disappear. And then the door opened again. The sound of claws tapping softly against the hallway floor. Officer Grant Holloway stepped in, holding a leash loosely in his hand. No uniform today. Just jeans, boots, and a tired face that had lived through too many bad nights. But it wasn't Grant who took Ava's breath away. It was the dog beside him. Coda. Older than most K9s still working. Coat a little duller. Gait a little slower. Eyes a lot wiser. A retired border dog from Texas. One who had weathered storms most humans never would. And yet, somehow, he carried himself like a being with nothing to prove. No bark, no excitement, no tail wagging, just presence. Quiet, grounded presence, big enough to fill the room, without doing anything at all. Grant offered Ava a small smile, real, unforced. Hey, Ava, he said softly. This is Coda. He's not here to do anything. He's just here. Coda didn't move, didn't approach, didn't demand attention. The old shepherd walked to the center of the room, circled once, and lowered himself onto the hardwood with a soft, heavy thud. Head down, ears relaxed, eyes half closed, not watching her, not waiting. Just existing. Ava stared at him, uncertain if he was even real. Her hands twisted into her sleeves, squeezing fear out of her fingers 1 trembling inch at a time. You don't have to touch him, Harper whispered. You don't have to do anything. Ava didn't nod, didn't blink, barely breathed. But she moved. Half a step, then another. Barely noticeable. Tru ki ban dang yin tung millimet trincote kobe. Grant stepped back, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. The posture of someone who knew this moment needed space. Ava hesitated in the middle of the room. Coda didn't look up. And that was the magic. Kids who are scared, truly scared, don't trust eyes watching them. But a dog who lies down quietly, pretending he has nothing better to do, that's an invitation. Slowly, like gravity was tugging her. Ava lowered herself to her knees beside him. Her breathing grew choppy. Her hands shook. She reached out, stopped, pulled back, then tried again. And then, Her fingertips brushed his fur, lightly, hesitantly, just enough to feel warmth. The room went still. Even the floor stopped creaking. Harper didn't breathe. Grant didn't blink. Ava froze, like she'd touched something sacred. Her eyes widened, not from fear, but recognition. Like her body remembered something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. She pressed her hand deeper into his coat. Coda finally lifted his head, slow, deliberate, and blinked at her. Not excited, not surprised, just present. Like he'd been waiting for her all along. Ava let out a breath. Long, shaky, broken at the edges. A breath she'd been holding for days, maybe weeks, maybe since Riverpoint Street. Her shoulders fell, her chin trembled, her forehead leaned toward Coda's side, not quite touching, but close. The world, finally, stopped shaking beneath her feet. Grant glanced at Harper, both trying so hard not to cry. Ava's lips parted, a door creaking open in a house that had been silent too long. And then, in a voice so soft you'd miss it if you blinked, she whispered, "Coda." Harper covered her mouth. Grant looked away, blinking hard. Even the old wooden floor seemed to sigh. 72 days. 72 days without a single word. And the one she chose, the one her broken voice crawled back for, was the name of a dog who hadn't even touched her yet. Coda didn't react dramatically. No bark, no nuzzle. He simply placed his head on her knee. Warm, steady, alive. Ava made a tiny sound. Not a sob, not a laugh. Something in between. Like her heart didn't know whether to shatter or start healing. Grant whispered, "Good boy." But honestly, Coda didn't need praise. He was doing what he'd always done, what he'd been trained to do. What he was. A shield, a bridge, a place for a broken child to land. And right there, on the scratched wooden floor of a poorly lit therapy room, the first sliver of light pierced the darkness that had swallowed Ava whole. One word, one touch, one dog. Sometimes, that's all it takes. And someone was, of course, Miles Carrington. The moment afternoon recess ended, the courtroom felt different, heavier, like everyone sensed something big was coming. They just didn't know from which direction. Ava sat back on the small witness chair, shoulders rounded inward. Coda curled at her feet, protective, alert. And then Miles stood up. Honest to God, you could feel the temperature drop. He buttoned his suit jacket, a crisp, intentional snap of fabric that somehow sounded like the beginning of trouble. Then he walked toward the jury with that slow, rehearsed smoothness you only see in men who practice their smiles in mirrors. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice warm enough to set off every internal alarm. "I want to talk to you, not as lawyers and jurors, but as human beings. A couple jurors nodded. Of course they did. This man knew exactly how to hook people. He placed a hand on his chest. Dramatic. Nhung Luyen Ki Roy. This case is emotional, raw, painful, and I understand the urge to want someone to blame. He paused. Just long enough. Long enough for sympathy to creep in. Then he glanced at Ava, not with compassion, with strategy. But, he said gently, children, especially traumatized children, sometimes confuse things. You could practically watch the manipulation seep into the room like smoke filling a tunnel. Ava's hands tightened in her lap. Coda's ears flicked upward. Grant Holloway stiffened in the back row. Miles stepped closer to the jury, lowering his voice. Hush, soft, calculated. I'm not saying she's lying, he offered, palms out in that practiced, fake honest gesture. Of course not. She's a child, a frightened one. The words hit Ava like a slap. Frightened child. Fragile mind. Unreliable witness. He didn't say those words, but everyone heard them between the lines. Children sometimes imagine monsters where there are none, Miles continued, especially after emotional distress. Ava's chin dropped lower, like a bird folding its wings. He kept going, relentless. Trauma can blur memories, change them, even create new ones. It's not her fault. He smiled sadly. Fear can feel real even when it isn't. It was manipulation at its most polished, a shift in responsibility, a gentle questioning of a child's sanity, a cruelty wrapped in sympathy's clothing. Officer Grant muttered, "Unbelievable." Jaw clenched so tight the muscle jumped. Miles walked toward the defense table, stopping beside Ethan Boyd, the accused father. Ethan sat perfectly posed, hands folded, eyes shimmering with rehearsed sadness. Miles placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Look at this man," he said softly, projecting grief like a theater actor. A father who loved his daughter more than anything. Someone in the gallery sniffed. A woman dabbed at tears. Coda lifted his head, sensing the tide turning against Ava. Miles continued, smooth as oil. And now he's accused of something he would never do. Something against every fiber of who he is. The lie rolled off his tongue like honey. Trauma, fear, confusion. These things twist memories. He glanced at Ava. Soft eyes, knife behind them. Sometimes, the story a child believes isn't the truth. Ava folded inward, shrinking, collapsing, disappearing. Her eyes dropped to Coda, not for comfort, but almost like an apology for not being strong enough. Coda pressed his paw gently onto her toe. A tiny gesture, a silent anchor. But she was sinking. Fast. Miles turned back to the jury. "My client has no history of violence," he said. "He's respected, steady, loved in his community." He said it like scripture, like a hymn. "Does this sound like a dangerous man?" or the imagination of a traumatized child searching for explanations she cannot understand. Silence rang out, heavy, sharp, poisonous, and damn it, some of them bought it. You could see it in their body language, the nods, the pensively crossed arms, the softening expressions. Ava shrank further until she looked like a child being erased. One lie at a time, one twist at a time. Crushed under words she couldn't fight back against, because her voice had been stolen long before this trial ever began. Coda leaned fully into her leg, eyes burning holes straight through Miles Carrington, like he could see the rot in the man's soul. Ava lowered her head until her chin touched her chest. Small, folded, silent, like a baby bird crushed by the storm. And as Miles walked back to his table, a victorious smirk flickering for a split second, the whole courtroom felt something ugly settle in the air. He was winning. He was winning against a child, and he was proud of it. The courtroom had shifted into that strange in-between moment. The judge sorting papers, the prosecutor prepping the next witness, the jury whispering among themselves. Nothing official happening, just that messy downtime where people stretched, shifted, sighed. And Miles Carrington saw his opening. He didn't walk toward the defense table, didn't check his notes, didn't sip his water. He walked straight toward Ava. Not fast, not aggressive, just casually, like a man strolling to a vending machine. But Coda noticed first. His ears twitched back, slight, small, surgical, but enough to show he was tracking every step Miles took. Ava stared at her lap, trying not to cry after being publicly dismantled. Her fingers twisted in Coda's fur, her breaths tiny, shallow things, like she'd forgotten how to inhale without shaking. Miles leaned casually against the witness stand railing, with a smile so fake it hurt to look at. He pretended to adjust his tie, pretended to check his watch, pretended to glance at the judge, but his eyes never left Ava. He waited until everyone else looked away, until no one was watching but Coda. Then, slowly, he crouched down. Ava stiffened instantly, like someone poured ice water down her spine. Her hands shook, her breath hitched. Coda pressed closer, subtle, controlled. No growl, no bark, just tension. Miles lowered his voice to that same poisonous whisper he'd used before. "Hey," he murmured, fake soft, razor sharp underneath. Ava's eyes flicked up, just barely, just enough to see the monster wearing a suit. Miles smiled wider, not warm, sharp, triumphant. Then he said it. "Rate 80% pitch, threest. If you open your mouth again, just once, I'll make sure they use your dog for live fire drills." Ava froze, not emotionally, physically. Every muscle locked at the same terrifying second. Miles leaned closer, eyes glittering with cruelty. "They miss on purpose sometimes," he whispered. "Triggers slip, dogs drop, tragic accidents." He shrugged. "People move on." A tiny broken sound escaped Ava's throat. Not a cry, not a scream, something in between, like the sound a child makes when their soul cracks. Coda reacted instantly. His body tightened, every muscle coiling, breath dropping into that deep, steady rhythm he used before launching on suspects years ago. But he didn't move, not 1 inch. Because Coda wasn't just any dog. He was trained, disciplined, a soldier who understood restraint better than most humans in that room. Ava shook. Her jaw trembled. Her lips parted in silent sobs. Tears spilled onto Coda's fur. Quiet. Invisible unless you were looking. Miles watched it like someone admiring artwork. "You keep quiet," he whispered, "and your little mutt gets to live. Understand?" Ava nodded. Tiny, terrified, fast. Coda lifted his head, very slowly, not to bite, not to snarl, just to look at Miles. And that look wasn't angry, wasn't savage. It was colder. A soldier evaluating a threat. A warrior marking a target. Miles misread it completely. He smirked, thinking he'd scared both of them silent. But he didn't notice what mattered. He didn't see the tiny red blink under Coda's collar. A faint pulse. A heartbeat of light. Blink. Time 300 miles from school. Blink, blink, recording. Capturing every poisonous word. Wrapping Miles's downfall around his own neck like a noose. Ava didn't notice. She was too busy clinging to Coda like he was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. But someone did. From the back row, Officer Grant Holloway's eyes widened. He saw it. He understood it. And he whispered, "Come on, boy. Hold steady." Miles stood up, fixing his jacket like he'd just straightened a child's collar. Not threatened her entire world. Ava sobbed silently, shoulders trembling in tiny jerks she couldn't control. She pressed her face into Coda's neck, trying to disappear into him, trying to breathe through the fear choking her. Coda stayed still, perfectly still, a living shield, a silent witness, a soldier waiting for the moment to strike. Not with teeth, but with truth. Because sometimes the most dangerous warrior in the room is the one who never makes a sound. And watching this moment unfold, watching a child break under the whisper of a monster while her dog stood guard, it started with something subtle. Officer Grant Holloway stood up. Not fast. Not dramatically, just stood. But the sound of his chair scraping the floor cut through the room like a knife. Heads turned. Jurors looked up. Even the judge paused mid-sentence, eyebrows lifting like, "Okay, what now?" Grant cleared his throat, adjusting the small device in his hand. Something no one had noticed until this exact moment. Ava didn't see him. She was still curled around Coda, eyes red and puffy, breaths shaky, like she couldn't get enough air in. Coda's ear flicked at the sound of Grant moving, but his body stayed locked around Ava like a fortress. Miles Carrington finally looked up too. At first, he looked annoyed, mild, dismissive, like someone interrupting his victory lap. But when he saw the object in Grant's hand, His expression twitched, just barely, but enough. Grant raised his voice, not loud, but firm. Your Honor, I have new evidence. The whole courtroom stilled. Even the air paused. The judge leaned back, adjusting his glasses. New evidence? At this stage? Yes, Your Honor, Grant said. Something crucial. Miles let out a laugh. Small, pretend casual, the kind slime balls use when they're stalling. Your Honor, he said, rising, this is highly irregular. I'm sure the officer is simply Sit down, Mr. Carrington. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. That alone made people blink. Grant didn't wait. He stepped forward holding the small receiver linked to Coda's collar, and with one steady breath, he pressed the button. A soft crackle filled the room. Miles froze, truly froze, like someone had swapped him with a wax statue. Then, his own voice spilled into the speakers. Not confident, not polished, not lawyer slick. No, the whisper, the venom, the threat. If you open your mouth again, just once, I'll make sure they use your dog for live fire drills. The room reacted instantly. A gasp from the gallery. Someone dropped their pen. A juror covered her mouth with both hands. Miles's face went sheet white. Not pale. Gray. Ash gray. The judge's eyebrows shot upward. What was that? Grant didn't blink. He pressed the button again. Accidents happen during K9 drills. Dogs drop. Tragic accidents. Miles swallowed so hard it echoed. Ava lifted her head. Slowly, confused, tears still clinging to her lashes. Coda shifted, looking at her. A silent "that" was him. That's what I protected you from. One juror whispered, "Oh my God." Another leaned back like they'd been hit. Miles stumbled forward, hands shaking. Your Honor, this is taken out of context. This is fabricated, clearly. Fabricated? The judge roared. Mr. Carrington, that is your voice. Miles opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Grant stepped forward again, calm as stone. For the record, he said, Coda wore this collar during his years as a border K9. It has a proximity-triggered audio recorder, standard tech for undercover work. The department reactivated it for therapy sessions. Grant's voice dipped lower. It activates when someone whispers close enough. His eyes locked onto Miles. And you whispered very, very close. A wave of murmurs crashed through the courtroom. He threatened her? You hear that? He's done. The judge held up a hand. The room fell quiet. His voice was a storm. Mr. Carrington, do you have any explanation for threatening a minor witness and her service dog during an active trial? Miles shook his head wildly. No, this is a setup. This is illegal. Maybe, one juror shouted. You should have thought of that before threatening to kill a dog. The room exploded. The judge's gavel slammed again and again. Order! Order in this court! But there was no order left. The balance had shifted. Miles knew it. The jury knew it. The entire damn room knew it. Grant walked to Ava and knelt beside her. "You did nothing wrong," he whispered, "and he can't hurt you. Not now." Ava blinked through tears, looking from Grant to Coda to Miles's terrified face. For the first time, she wasn't the one drowning. Someone else was. And it was the man who tried to destroy her. Miles Carrington wasn't just losing the case. He was imploding. And everyone in Redwood County watched it happen in real time. And the person doing the shaking was Officer Grant Holloway. After the first recording ended, the room was already in shambles. Jurors whispering, the gallery erupting, Miles looking like someone had ripped the ground out from under him. Ava clung to Coda, still shaking, but different now, less being crushed, more watching something shift. Then Grant took one slow step toward the judge. "Your Honor," he said, voice low but steady, "there's more." Miles's head jerked, so fast it looked painful. "What? No! Your Honor, this is outrageous. We can't, this court cannot." "Mr. Carrington," the judge thundered, "you will remain silent unless spoken to." Miles froze, mid-rant, jaw tight, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Grant lifted the device again, paused, looked directly at the jury, and pressed the button. A second crackle. Then, Miles's own voice filled the courtroom again. But this time it wasn't a whisper. It was worse. "Make sure the second exam report disappears before morning." The room went dead silent. Grant didn't stop it. He let it play. "If they find the bruising photos, the whole case falls apart. I don't care what you have to do. Blur them, crop them, burn them." The courtroom exploded. "What? Oh my God! That's illegal! You've got to be kidding me!" Coda lifted his head, ears flicking, body tense but calm. Ava flinched, but didn't curl into herself this time. She looked startled, confused, like she couldn't understand why adults were finally reacting. Grant played the next part. "Pay the neighbor whatever. Just make sure she changes her statement. I want her crying on the stand about how he's a victim." A juror stood up. Another slammed both palms onto the railing. Someone in the gallery shouted, "That's a felony!" The judge hammered his gavel again and again. "Order! Order in this court!" But there was no order left. Zero. Redwood had snapped. Miles stumbled forward, legs wobbling. That is taken out of context. These are private conversations. This is inadmissible. This is... He was babbling. Actually babbling. Grant didn't even look at him. He pressed the button again. Miles's voice came through. Cold. Calculated. A man who rehearsed evil until it felt natural. "Look, just do what I said. If we have to rewrite the narrative, we rewrite it. She's a kid. She won't fight back. The jury will eat it up." A collective gasp tore through the room. Ava jerked upright. like someone pulled a string tied to her spine. Her eyes widened, not scared, not confused, recognizing. That was the tone she remembered, the voice she heard behind closed doors, the manipulation she never had words for. Grant paused the recording and looked at the judge. "Sir, these were automatically cached on the K9 unit's device. Chain of custody is intact." The judge stared at Miles, long, cold, disbelieving. "You," the judge whispered, "tampered with evidence?" "No!" Miles shouted. "They're twisting! This is entrapment! This is... A juror yelled over him. "You threatened a child! On tape!" Miles looked around, drowning. But every face staring back held nothing but disgust. A woman in the gallery stood and pointed. "You're a monster!" The judge slammed his gavel again, voice cracking. "Bailiffs, contain the room!" But it was too late. Redwood had heard enough. Ava watched all of it, like she couldn't comprehend the world shifting around her. The man who broke her was breaking in front of everyone else. Coda nudged her hand, gentle, grounding. This time, she didn't grab him out of fear. She simply rested her fingers on his fur, soft, steady. Miles staggered back, palms shaking, face blotchy and white. You don't understand. I was trying to... This child... She... But no one was listening now. Every lie he told was unraveling. Every manipulation exposed. Every whispered threat tightening like a noose around his career, his freedom, his ego. And Redwood Superior Court was watching the fall in real time. One collapse after another. One truth after another. A tidal wave sweeping away the last of his defenses. The moment the last recording stopped playing, the judge didn't hesitate, not even for a breath. His voice cracked like thunder. "Bailiffs, take Mr. Carrington into custody, now." Miles barely had time to open his mouth before the bailiffs were on him. One grabbing his arm, the other shoving his briefcase away like it was radioactive. "No, wait, this is a mistake. Your Honor, I can Click. The handcuffs snapped shut with a metallic bite that echoed through the entire courtroom. Ava flinched at the sound. Coda didn't. He watched. Silent. Still. Eyes trained on Miles like the dog knew. This was justice finally stepping into the room. Miles twisted, trying to shake off the bailiffs, but he just looked pathetic, sweaty, pale. "Let go of me. I'm the attorney of record. You can't do this." But the courtroom was done listening to him. Everyone had heard enough. Ava sat frozen, staring at the place where Miles had whispered into her ear, where he scared her into silence, where he made her believe her truth didn't matter. And now? He was being dragged out the door. Small karma. Big moment. Coda nudged her knee, soft, grounding, like, "Hey, it's okay now." And that, somehow, was what finally made her move. Ava slid off the witness chair so fast she nearly tripped. Her shoes tapped too loud on the marble floor. She pushed through people, past jurors, past benches, past a stunned officer who stepped aside just in time. Then she burst into the hallway. Coda was right behind her, paws clicking, body glued to her shadow. When they reached the quiet part of the corridor, away from chaos, away from shouting, away from Miles's distant protests, Ava stopped. Just stopped. Her chest rose and fell in a frantic, shaky rhythm. Tears streaming down her cheeks, not small, not silent, but full, trembling sobs ripping free all at once. Coda closed the distance in one step. Ava threw her arms around his neck. So hard she nearly knocked herself over. Her face disappeared into his fur, like she was trying to hide inside him. Bury herself in the only safe place she knew. "Coda," she cried, voice muffled, raw. "Coda." Her words cracked apart in the air, like they didn't know how to hold themselves together. She sobbed into him, gripping fistfuls of fur, her small body shaking, the fear leaving her in messy, unstoppable waves, and Coda just took it. He stood perfectly still, legs braced, letting her cling to him like she was trying to stay afloat in a storm. Then he lowered his head, slow, intentional, pressing his muzzle against her chest, leaning into her heart like he was listening to it relearn how to beat. That's when she whispered it. Her voice cracked, small, barely sound at all. "You spoke for me when I couldn't." Coda exhaled, long, heavy, like he'd been carrying that job on his back for months, and someone finally lifted it off. Ava's tears soaked into his fur. She didn't let go, not even a little. No one had the heart to interrupt. Officer Grant Holloway stepped into the hallway slowly, like he was entering a sacred moment. He placed a hand on the wall and just breathed. A little girl collapsing into the only creature who never doubted her. A dog standing like a shield even in the quiet. Two survivors holding on to each other like their souls were stitched together. Grant swallowed hard, rubbed his eyes, pulled himself together. Then he knelt beside them. "Hey, kid," he whispered. "You did so good today. You hear me? So good." Ava didn't answer. She just held Coda tighter, like he might disappear if she loosened her grip. Grant placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "He's okay," he said softly. "No one's touching him. Not ever again." Coda lifted his head, staring straight at Grant with a look that said, "Damn right they're not." Ava finally pulled back, just enough to see his face. Her small hands cupped his cheeks, her forehead pressed to his. "You saved me," she whispered. Coda blinked once, slow. Then he let out a sound that wasn't quite a sigh, wasn't quite a huff, something in between. A release, a relief, a letting go of months of silent weight. And in that tiny hallway of Redwood Superior Court, with chaos roaring behind the doors, a child reclaimed her safety, and a dog reclaimed his purpose. Rocky Ridge K9 Sanctuary, tucked against the foothills west of Redwood County, where the mountains carve the sky into sharp, beautiful shapes, and the wind always smells a little like pine and old stories. Late afternoon, that magic hour, when the whole world glows warm and gold, like someone dipped the sun in honey before dropping it behind the hills. Coda hopped out of the back seat first, slower than he used to, stiffer in the hips, but still with that strong, steady stride. A soldier's walk, even in retirement. Ava followed, small fingers brushing the car door, tracing nervous little circles like she was trying to distract her heart from the truth that today was the day. "Hey," Grant said softly, closing the door behind them. "You okay?" Ava didn't answer. She just stared at Coda's back. Broad, familiar, safe. The dog who saved her voice. The dog who saved her life. The dog she wasn't ready to let go of. "Mm-hmm," she whispered, even though it wasn't true. Grant didn't push, just nodded, letting her have her silence. They walked toward the sanctuary gates. Old wooden fencing, hand-painted signs, the faint sound of other retired K-9s barking and greeting. Dogs who'd spent years chasing danger and were now learning how to sleep without checking every shadow. Coda paused at the entrance and looked back at Ava. And Ava, God, her face just crumpled when their eyes met. Not because he was leaving her behind, but because she finally understood why he had to. Grant knelt beside her, gentle hand on her shoulder. "He's earned this," he said softly. "He gave everything he had. Now he gets to rest." Ava nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, I know. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less." Coda trotted ahead, sniffing the dirt, mapping this new chapter of his life. Ava walked toward him, slow, careful, like approaching a memory she didn't want to break. She knelt in front of him, face to face, heart to heart. "Coda," she whispered. He stepped closer, pressing his forehead to hers the way he always did when she was scared. But this time it wasn't to shield her from fear. It was a goodbye. A soft breeze drifted across the field, carrying sun-baked earth and the distant sound of other dogs running freely. The sky burned in deep oranges and purples. Colorado's quiet way of saying, "Pay attention. This moment matters." Ava reached for Coda's collar. The metal felt cool, too cool for something that carried so much history. This little device had heard every whispered threat, every attempt to silence her, every ugly truth Miles tried to bury. She unlatched it slowly, carefully, like removing a bandage from a wound that wasn't healed yet. The recorder fell into her palm. Coda watched her with stillness that made her hands tremble. "This helped save me," she whispered. "But you were the reason. Not this." She reached into her pocket. A new collar. White nylon. A small silver charm. The engraving caught the sunlight, flashing like a spark. Forever family. Not K-9 unit. Not service dog. Not retired. Family. She clipped the new collar around his neck, brushing fur away so the tag rested right against his chest. "There," she whispered. That's better. Coda stepped forward, pressing his face into her chest. Not just a nuzzle, not just affection, a final anchoring. Ava let out a sob, the one she'd been holding in since the drive. She wrapped her arms around him, tight, desperate, burying her face into his fur. You're home now, she cried. Even if I'm not here with you. You're home. Coda exhaled, long, low, like he was finally letting go of a weight he'd carried far too long. Not just goodbye, but, you're safe now. My job is done. Grant looked away, eyes glassy, jaw tight. Because even tough guys with badges can't watch something like that without cracking right down the middle. The sun dipped lower. Sanctuary lights flickered on. Ava pulled back, just enough to look into his eyes. Those deep, soul-heavy eyes that knew too much and loved too much and never once asked anything in return. You'll remember me, right? She whispered. Coda blinked once, slow, intentional, and in that blink, an entire lifetime of yes. Ava pressed her forehead to his one last time. I love you, she whispered. Always. Coda leaned in, soft, steady. The new tag chimed quietly against his chest as the wind shifted. And somewhere in that Colorado sunset, a chapter closed with the gentlest, purest heartbreak the world ever wrote. 10 years had passed. 10 whole years. God, it doesn't feel real when you say it out loud. 1 minute she was a scared little girl whispering her first word in a therapy room. And now she was 18. Now she was the person kids ran to when the world had hurt them. Now she was the one kneeling beside trembling shoulders, whispering, It's okay. You're safe. Life has a strange way of looping back on itself. Ava Bennett now worked at the Redwood Center for Animal-Assisted Healing, the only therapy program in Colorado run entirely by trauma-trained handlers and retired service dogs. Everyone in town knew the story of the girl who'd once lost her voice, and the dog who guided her back to it. But Ava rarely talked about it. Not publicly. Not unless she had to. Because some memories don't fade. They just settle. Deep. Quiet. Permanent. That morning, she parked her old pickup at the base of Rocky Ridge K9 Memorial Garden, the same sanctuary where Coda had spent the last gentle years of his life. The sky was doing that early spring Colorado thing, blue enough to make you emotional, but with wind sharp enough to remind you you're still alive. Ava stepped out, tucking wind-blown hair behind her ear. In her hand, a small velvet pouch. Inside it, the one thing she'd kept close for years, but had never been strong enough to return. The tag. Forever Family. The first collar she ever gave Coda. She followed the stone path into the garden. Rows of carved granite markers, each one holding the name of a dog who had served, protected, or simply stayed beside someone who needed them. The air smelled like pine and warm stone, and somewhere far off, A single hawk circled the ridge. It took her a minute to find his spot. Not because it was hidden. Coda's name sat at the center of the memorial, right, where the director insisted it belonged. But because her heart wasn't ready for it. The polished stone caught sunlight like it still remembered him. Coda, K9, Unit 274. Loyalty without limits. Ava inhaled through her nose, slow and steady, just like he once taught her without teaching. She knelt in front of the marker. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, voice trembling at the edges. "It's been a while, I know." She reached into the pouch and pulled the tag out. It glinted, silver, worn, dented from years of love and nervous fidgeting. "Forever, family." Her fingertips traced the letters the way she once traced the fur on his neck. "You never liked being the center of attention," she murmured, shaky smile flickering. "Sorry. You kinda ended up being a legend." Wind pushed her hair across her cheek. She tucked it away again, blinking hard. "I work with the kids now," she whispered. "The ones who don't talk much. The ones who freeze up. The ones who flinch at every sharp sound." She swallowed. "Kids like I was. Kids who need their own coda." Her throat tightened. "And I really try, but—" A soft laugh, fragile, heart sore. "I'm not you. I don't know how you did it. How you always knew when to be still, when to nudge me, when to just breathe with me." She set the tag at the base of the stone, right beside a carved paw print. "I brought this back," she whispered. "It should be with you." Her palm rested on the cold granite. "Coda didn't just save me from that night," she said, voice cracking but steady. "He saved the part of me that knew how to live afterward." The wind shifted, soft, warm, like a gentle exhale through the spruce trees. Ava closed her eyes. She could almost feel him there. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as something warm pressing into her chest the way he once did in the courthouse hallway. "I miss you," she breathed, barely audible. "Every day. Not the broken me you helped. The me I became because you stayed." The sun dipped lower, hitting the silver tag just right. It chimed, a tiny, delicate ting, like someone tapped it lightly with a fingertip. Ava opened her eyes. The tag swayed once in the breeze. Just once. She smiled through tears spilling down her cheeks. "That's you, isn't it?" she whispered. "Still answering me. Still here." She sat back on her heels, letting the moment settle like a soft ache in her chest. Above her, the mountains glowed gold. The wind slowed. The garden fell into that sacred stillness that only exists when love outlives time. And then Ava spoke the truth she'd carried for a decade. "He didn't just save me from a nightmare. He saved the whole life that came after it." The breeze answered with a soft rustle through the memorial trees, a sound that felt like presence, not weather. Ava touched the tag one last time. Forever family, she whispered. Always. She stood, breathed, walked back down the path. Stronger, steadier, a person grown from love instead of broken by fear. And as she reached the gate, the tag chimed again in the wind. Quiet, warm, like a reply. Before we close this story, let me ask you something gentle. Have you ever had a dog that stayed in your heart long after they were gone? A. Yes. No. I am living that story right now.